Good evening and welcome back to another episode of What's Your Story? Tonight we are sitting down with our town head of planning and development. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah, we'll run with that.
This is Werner Gilliam. Thank you for being with us tonight. What's your real title?
Sure. Yeah. No.
You probably have 5.
It's a good question. No. So my official title, or at least what's on my card, is Director of Planning and Development.
Okay, Director. Okay.
So there's a lot of stuff that kind of falls into that.
I bet. So we usually ask our guests where you grew up. And how the heck did you get to Kennebunkport?
Sure.
So if you want to start way back.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Yeah. No. So I'm a bit of a mix, really.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was born in Heidelberg, Germany, but was only there just briefly.
Military
as a
family?
child. No.
No.
No. My mother she was a technical translator. But from Germany and wanted me to be born over there. And so she went back home, had me over there, and then came back.
Yeah.
Spent a little bit of time until I was about 7 north of Pittsburgh, in western Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But I would say that I mostly grew up in western Kentucky, in Owensboro, Kentucky.
Okay.
So it's where my dad worked. He worked for Ragu Foods, so we always had plenty of spaghetti sauce in the house, but
not just on Wednesdays.
No, it came home by the case usually. And then after high school, actually I went back up to western Pennsylvania and went to college at Westminster College, which is just same thing north of Pittsburgh in New Wilmington.
Yeah.
It's kind of Amish country.
That must have been pretty. That must be pretty up there.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful area there. And after college, I went to work for a nonprofit housing ministry called Hosanna Industries, right outside of Pittsburgh, where we did rehab work on homes for folks who couldn't afford home repairs and things like that. But we'd also travel, so we would do disaster relief builds in Texas and Florida. Places like that. And it was there that I met my wife, Amanda, who grew up in Kennebunk. Yeah. And so we got married and moved to Delaware for a little bit. And then the plan was always to make our way back to Maine.
Yeah.
And now I feel like I'm going to date myself here. I wound up here in Kennebunkport when my mother-in-law sent me the newspaper clipping of a job offering as the assistant codes officer and planner here in the port. So that's how we got here.
Well, good for you. Does your wife's family are there still family members here?
Yeah, very much so.
That must be nice and helpful because you have a family of your own.
Yep. Yes, we have 2 boys, so Jamie and Matt. Jamie's over at the middle school, and Matt's in Consolidated. So, but it's great to have family, local and close by.
Yeah, so. Sometimes there's just something about that, and it is good that coming back here and do you live in the area?
So we just recently moved into the port. We're off Whitten Hill Road.
Wow, good for you.
Before that, we lived over on Catmouse Road over in Kennebunk.
Okay, all right. So you want to be closer to work?
That's
you can ride your bike.
That's a great point. It actually is. Some of those rules that you have. One of my rules really was to not live and work in the same place. Like to have that nice degree of separation from work and home. Yeah. But I think just the longer that I've been here working with the town, I think a lot of those concerns about that separation, really went away, and we're in a good place where we're at. So
I agree, and I don't mind when I'm at the post office you might, because what you're doing is a little different than what I do. But when
Right,
someone
right.
says, "Hey, can you renew my book?" Or if I'm even in the supermarket, someone might say that to me. So, but you might get asked a few questions here and there, I bet, when you're off duty.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, as a general rule, I mean, Hannaford's not where I go. Market baskets.
There you go.
A lot.
There you go.
There's a lot less traffic over there.
So, could you take us through sort of a day in life of what your job is? I know it probably changes a lot, but like, what would be like a typical work day for you?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and some of it's really changed over the years. Just as the town has changed, and I think and really what a lot of the demands have changed. And I can tell you, so for a lot of folks, there's always those emails that are out there. So the day always kind of starts off with just seeing where things left off from the day before. It's getting into those emails. I can tell you really a lot of what I do, and it's to some degree, half the time it feels like it's counseling as much as anything.
Okay.
It can be really varied in terms of what questions that folks have. It's everything from the the relatively simple walking folks through a permitting process, for a project. It might be a subdivision lot, which is relatively straightforward, but we have a lot of these unique properties that each one has a bit of a different story.
Right.
And so a lot of that is helping people navigate that process and understanding their own property. It could be anything from from a business owner, trying to pivot a little bit in terms of what they can do with their business. Or just property owners trying to figure out what their next project might look like, what their next steps might look like. But I would say that's a fair amount, of what kind of what goes on. A lot of it's interpretation, and a lot of it is understanding history too. We've got a lot of really interesting old historical information, and sometimes it's walking folks through the history of their property or the history of the area. And then and then I also I still do a fair amount of development review. So as a property owner or developer may have an idea, it's going to be taking a look at the plan, doing a review of it, providing some feedback based on that. So, and within our department too, I mean, we have assessing, is within the department.
Okay,
We do planning and and the codes piece of it. And so a lot of
inspection.
the
that
building
too?
inspections. Not so much anymore. I wish I actually was able to get out in the field more. But I think a lot of more just where my strengths lie have been with really kind of helping people negotiate. Different things that they're come across, and and understanding the regs. A lot of it can be tricky and complex, and especially as we see floodplain items change.
Right.
Folks are just looking for answers and trying to understand what's going on. But
in our area, in the time that we're here, and you've been here, how long have you been working for the town?
I came here in late 2005.
Okay. So even in your time period, you've seen a lot of change.
Yeah.
It's not a very long period of time.
No.
But how are you able to look 10 years ahead and say, okay, this is what we need to do? What do you use for your tools?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it depends on what kind of change it is that that you're talking about.
Well, let's take the pier road that what's on on the table right
Sure,
now.
yeah.
You've been talking a lot about that in the last few years. So you will work with engineers, or I'm clueless. So
no, I mean pier roads is a great one to talk about. And specifically, we're concerned with the causeway. I mean that's a great one. To talk about there. I think what one of the things that we realized was as we're investing all this time and effort and money into the Cape Porpoise Pier,
Yeah.
you know, the next real step was, well, gosh, we want to make sure we can still get to it. You know, this
Good point.
doesn't do us much good as if we can't get to it.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and that's how we. Sometimes it really is a practical look at, you know, those are the next projects. You
Yeah.
know, we try to take a more practical approach to it. And I mean, I think that section of road has always historically had some flooding issues. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not a surprise, you know, to
Yeah.
anyone.
Yeah.
But it's the frequency, you know, with which we're seeing, you know, those things come up.
Yeah.
You know, where it seemed like maybe we were being alerted to that, you know, every few years, you know, and now it's no longer just, you know, well, if I've got an astronomical high and if I've got
Yeah.
this really long nor'easter and, you know, it's no longer lining up the, you know, the perfect elements of where we're
Right.
seeing these areas impacted,
Right.
you know,
Right.
so.
Extreme, and on that more frequent basis, it's pretty scary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Whenever you start to see, you know, get pictures of, you know, water coming to the top of the guardrail, you know, it's like, that hasn't always been like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So if somebody brings you a plan and they want to build, you know, something, you know, you go through that process with a couple of different departments, right? Yours, and then there's the planning board.
Yep.
That a plan goes ahead.
Yeah, depends on what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So have there been times where you say, you know, I'm really sorry, but this just isn't going to work? You know, I mean, you probably have to
Sure.
give bad news
Yeah.
sometimes. But for the most part, you try to work. I see what you do. You try to work with people to make something,
Right.
you know, something happen. I think that's what this town is all about.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, it just speaks to who's working here in this town because you care.
Right.
So, but you care in that way that you're, like you're saying, if you're going to do something to the pier, you got to make sure that you can get to the pier. So thinking through and not just one-offs here and there,
Right.
which some towns I think tend to do.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you know, I try to think, you know, whenever, you know, one thing I will say is that people are generally pretty good about doing due diligence, right? You know, and so, I mean, not always, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes we get ones that come out of left field and it's like, boy, you didn't talk to anybody, you know, but those are pretty rare. Most folks will do their due diligence,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, it's not uncommon to have people, you know, come in with, you know, with a big plan, you know. And then we have to temper that,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, give them some guidance in terms of, you know, how successful they're going to be, you know, and that's what we do. You know, I mean, I'll give them the full range. You know, it's like,
Right.
well, sure, we could go that route, but you know, but you might have to get an ordinance amendment, and for that, you have to convince the people to vote for that, and that, you know what, there's a process,
Right.
and you never say never. But there's probably a limited, you know,
Yeah.
path of success there.
Yeah.
You know, so let's bring it back into the lane of where we can try to give you a greater, you know, a reasonable expectation of success.
Yeah,
So,
Codes. How do you keep up with all of that? You read in the middle of the night?
no,
No,
no, not at all. You know,
because I would think that stuff would kind of drive you a little cuckoo.
yeah, yeah. No, it's no, not at all. I mean, with building codes, you know, is a great example. And you know, what I learned early on is that, you know, whenever you're sitting for an exam or even doing any of the education, you know, it's, you know, one, it's really not memorizing it at all. You know, it's really just understanding how the document is arranged and knowing where to go to find the answer. You know, I think it's, you know, where I see some code officers, you know, not doing great is whenever they come at it with that expectation they've memorized it, you know, as opposed to walking somebody through the path and finding the answer that way. And so, I don't try to keep it in my head.
Stuff changes.
It does. interpretations change. You know, there's a lot of continuing education. You know, as a, I would say as a group, as code officers in the state of Maine, I'm on the board of the Building Officials Association.
Yeah.
And so we stay in touch with each other.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we have, you know, we've got a chat group through email where folks ask questions. You know, we're constantly, you know, discussing and interpreting with each other.
Yep.
Because we generally want to have a consistent answer. You know,
Right.
Nobody likes to hear the, you know, well, you know, and you know, Wells says this,
Wells,
and
yeah.
right, you know,
Yeah, so that's good that you have colleagues that you can kind of bounce things off of,
Right.
and that's really good.
you know, and we don't always agree.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's, you
Yeah.
know, I tell folks, I said, you know, you could send 5 code officers into a house, and generally you might come up with slightly different, you know, lists from every single one of them. But I'd like to think we've got the same themes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as far as schooling goes, like you're talking about exams, you have to sit for certain exams to pass, or like how, if I wanted to go into your field of
Yeah.
Expertise, what would I need to do?
No, so that's a great question. No, well, that's, you know, it's actually something that as an organization, as a group, like we're recognizing that, you know, and I think every industry right now is struggling with, you know, the fact that some jobs there's not a real clear path.
Right.
You know,
Right.
And for some, like we really lack, you know, we really lack the folks needed, you know, to continue, you know, to continue the job in the industry.
Yeah.
You know, I could take on paper, it's here are the exams that are you know, that are put up by the state of Maine. You need to take these and pass them. Once you pass them, then you get, you know, a certification.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of the simple book answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we know that doesn't really make you necessarily good at your job. It just shows that you can pass a test.
Yeah.
And so we've actually been in discussions with the community college and, you know, different organizations about, you know, how do we maybe establish, you know, a mentoring process.
Internship or
Exactly.
something like that.
Those types of things. I mean, we often draw from the trades. You know, I mean, that's fairly common. You know, that, you know, somebody with trades experience, you know, will look for a career change.
Yeah.
But that's not always, you know, that's not always the case.
Yeah.
And it's not always the right skill set. You know, as I mentioned, some of it is counseling as much as anything.
Yeah. Right.
You know, I may have somebody who really knows their trades, but isn't really a good people person.
Right.
You know?
Right. I see you at a lot of meetings, and they're not at 10 o'clock in the morning. They're sometimes, you know, with the selectmen and, you know, over at the fire station.
Sure, yeah.
How many meetings do you attend a month?
Well, I get that question a lot, you know, and I say, well, you know, you probably watched me on repeat, you know, a couple of times, you know. But there's a fair number of meetings, you know. I mean, you know, we provide, you know, staffing for the growth planning committee, which works on the comp plan. You know, planning board, which goes through different, you know, site plan apps. And, you know, the selectmen, you know, I mean, there's usually always a topic at the selectmen that requires some level of input from, you know, from planning and codes. And, you know, and coming up, you know, coming up for the month of March, it'll be budget season. It'll be budget season, so every Thursday.
So you're sort of on hand in case they have questions, or?
It's usually if there's something specific on the agenda. Which most of the time there usually is, you know, something that's there. But yeah, I mean, it could be everything from, you know, we were talking capital, you know, the other night, you know, and so that was providing some comment on, you know, the new, the process of thinking about a new town hall, you know, so it was, you know, some comments and thoughts on that. So.
Yeah, and that's not just something that happens in a month's time. I mean, there is a lot of planning that goes into that.
Right.
So, on the business side, I know I'm jumping around on things. I just have many things that are coming to mind. Do you have any input when people want to bring business to town? Like, does that fall under your, as far as development, does that fall under
Sure.
what you do?
Yeah. Yeah, to some degree. I mean, I will say I think Kennebunkport is a bit unique in that, unlike a lot of other communities that really have, like large commercial districts, we don't really have that.
Yeah.
So that's not a big, that's not a big part of what we do.
Yeah.
For the most part, it is business, if there is business development or discussion, it's folks, coming and really looking to try to figure out how they fit into the existing commercial
Okay.
landscape.
Yeah.
It's, I would say, call it one of the blessings of Kennebunkport,
Yeah,
and that there's
yeah.
a distance from
Yeah.
95 and Route 1.
Right, right.
If Route 9 was really like Route 1, I mean, the character of the community, I think,
Yeah.
would be dramatically
Very
different.
Yeah.
And so a lot of I would say the bigger business pressure just hasn't come here yet, because that pressure is
Yeah.
really more drawn out to the interstate.
Yeah, they needed a little bit more, probably closer to the turnpike.
That's right.
and
Yeah, a
all
lot of
things,
those,
yeah.
a lot of the, your kind of, bigger, bigger business entities,
Yeah.
are looking primarily, at that type of access.
Yeah.
And so we don't have to really address that piece of it. What we do have is we have folks that are, that try to figure out how to carve, a niche for themselves, and whether it be home businesses. I mean, we have a lot of, there's a lot of service, industry
Yeah.
here in town.
Yeah. Some towns I find that, there might be like 3 or 4 coffee shops all opening at the same time. And I always think, why? Because isn't there anybody in town telling them that there's this one, and this one also just got approved, and is it going to be survival of the fittest? Or especially when people are putting their own hard-earned money they're investing in their business, and
Right.
And sort of that, like, how does that guidance work from the town's standpoint?
Sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a tricky question. I mean, you never want to tell somebody, geez, I think you're gonna have a rough time with that one. Even though you might hear a business plan, and
Yeah.
in your mind you go, you might have a tough time with that one.
yeah, yep,
So it's not really our position to,
Right, okay.
discourage somebody.
Yeah,
If it fits, if it's something that fits within the zoning, then we'll guide them that way.
Yeah.
But there have definitely been some that, that haven't lasted, and
yeah,
I just think some of that is because of the seasonality, that we have here. They may come into a spot and,
yeah,
they may have done their research based on the summertime, but,
Okay.
like this time of year right now, it gets
Right.
to be a long period of time where
it does.
you
It
might not
does.
have much.
And you could maybe go days and days without, like, especially if if there's a retail store or something, you could go
Yeah.
sometimes weeks without anyone coming in. So
Yeah, and if
Yeah.
it's not catering to, to really your local demands,
yeah,
then, I mean, I think that's something that a business, should expect,
Yeah.
is that if they're not catering to a local demand,
Yeah.
then I don't think it should come as a surprise if things are quiet
Yeah.
sometimes.
Well, we've talked a lot about work. What do you like to do when you're not at work?
Yeah, when I'm not at work. Yeah. No, that's good. No, honestly, I like to spend time outside. We've got a travel trailer, that
Yeah.
That will it's funny, like, folks from the mountains come to the ocean, people kind of from the ocean tend to go to the mountains.
Yeah.
And so yeah, usually in the summertime you'll find us a couple times a year, taking a camper and
Yeah.
heading over into the White Mountains.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So that's some of it.
Hiking.
Yep, I like to do some some hiking, and all those good fun activities. We've got a couple of kayaks. We like
Yeah.
to get out into the water and
Oh, that's great.
and play around with that.
And your
some.
boys
So,
excited about doing that? Did
yeah,
they get?
yep, they do. Yeah, they
That's
enjoy. They enjoy it. Sometimes they tolerate me.
Uh-huh.
With it, but yeah, no. I've got an old Jeep CJ7. That I like to play around with.
Yep.
So, it's still old and simple enough that, if something goes wrong, you can figure it out.
Yeah. Well, that's
You
great.
know, so that's a fun toy that I putz with.
Favorite place to go? Like, where would be your favorite getaway if you had a few days?
Good getaway. So,
You don't want to give out, like, if it's a secret place, because you don't want anyone else getting there.
no, I'll tell you what, and this, so this is, if I'm going a couple days, where we've traveled a couple of times is I really enjoy Washington, D.C.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Just a lot of the history, there. We've been down a couple times, especially kind of in the off season.
Yeah.
There's just a lot to see and to do down there. We took the boys down a couple of years ago to the zoo.
Yeah.
And did parts of the Smithsonian. Actually, it was great. It was a time of year when there wasn't anybody there.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably
yeah.
now, when everybody's in school and you can get there.
Right. Yeah.
And you're getting an education just
Right.
by being,
Yeah. I've got those. I got the list of places in my mind that like next time we go down there.
Yeah.
That's a good, nice little couple day trip.
Yeah.
So I like a lot of the different historical places to get to and kind of
Right.
explore.
And so you get your travel trailer hooked up and off you go.
Well, down there, not really.
Not really?
We'll leave that. We leave that
Yeah.
at home for trips like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But
What's on your bucket list?
bucket list as far as for travel. Yeah, I mean DC is one of those. I want to get down. I want to see the Spy Museum. That's been on my list for a couple of them. A couple of the other Smithsonian locations.
Yeah.
Travel wise, and we'll see if the boys would ever tolerate it. I have in my mind the out west trip. Kind of that. The quintessential like couple of weeks. See the West.
That would be so much
I
fun.
did that once as a kid, a couple of times, and so it just
Yeah.
feels like one of those kind of rite of passage trips.
Yeah, and I think for those of us who live on this coast, it's very rare that we,
Yeah,
go that way. And every time someone talks about it, it's just the parks, just visiting the different parks.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's a whole other world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of our former board members, I think, when the national parks were celebrating big anniversary a few years back, he and his wife decided that that's what they were going to do. So they just took the summer and.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Love it.
So I know. It sounds like so much fun. And they were also different too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we might not be able to do it all at once. It might
Yeah.
be, it might have to break it up, into a couple of pieces, but.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one of the buckets, right there.
As far as Kennebunkport goes, in the next 5 years, do you see what would be something that you would want to work on and see through?
Yeah. I think one of the things that we've heard from folks on is is really trying to flesh out a bit of what the village parcel is going to look like.
Okay.
I mean, that was a piece, of property that the town, took advantage of when that became available.
Yeah.
And, we've had some visioning sessions in terms of kind of concepts and ideas of what people would like to see.
Yeah.
So I think part of the temptation is to be able to say, oh, this is great. Here's the plan for it, and this is what it'll look like. But it's also, some of that is being able to step back and make sure that the future generations have opportunity to do some of that as well.
Yeah.
To figure out what that wants to look like.
It's tough because you know what you have in your mind and in your heart of what you think, but it's not just about you or your vision.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
That's what happens here too. And I think there's certain things that I'd like to work on, but and I will with a team, but sometimes it's not always so.
Right. Yeah.
But that's but it's good that you have. I mean, it seems like you have a pretty good group of
Yeah.
people to work with.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's not just, it's not just a short-term, vision. It's kind of it's a
Yeah.
long-term,
Right.
picture. I mean, people sometimes forget. Towns used to really develop themselves. Like the residents and the selectmen really were the ones that did the road layouts and. And if there was, properties that needed to,
Right.
if roads needed to be adjusted, they dealt with those processes.
Yeah.
And, when zoning came about, it's almost as if all of that ceased. It really slowed up.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
that point, and development, really became something more that, private developers more responded to, as opposed to the other way around,
Yeah.
And so you kind of look back at zoning and what's occurred since the 70s,
Yeah.
and you look at it and, we ask people, so what are you excited about?
Yeah.
Right? What excites you about the town?
Yeah.
I find interesting most folks point to the things that predated zoning.
Interesting.
The things that we couldn't necessarily create today,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they point to all the things that, that were there prior to.
That were there over time, and that's a great way
Right.
that's a great way of looking at it. Like you say, it sort of evolves, and then, yeah.
Yeah. So the real places that have the real character are ones that have evolved slowly over time. Because they weren't necessarily cookie cutter or pre-planned or things like that. There's this kind of beauty in the randomness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something that as planners still are trying to capture. I mean, we'll try to capture some of that for Village Parcel. I mean, we'll try to put together a design standard for how things might develop, but to try to capture some of that randomness. That people when they look at, they really they really like.
So it doesn't just it's not so boxed out,
That's right.
And I think sometimes
Yeah.
you can really tell when that's happened.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. You don't necessarily want, there's a bunch of cookie cutter,
Yeah.
capes and federals and colonials, like that's, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. There's a lot of beauty in the randomness. Well, you see it right here.
Absolutely.
You see it right here in this,
Yeah, you really do.
in this in this area here. So
Yeah.
like when we think about that, it's like, how do we create a standard that would replicate this and
Right.
allow for it to happen?
Yeah.
I do find when I talk to some people about some of the numbers about it, the numbers kind of scare them. But when you show them visually what it looks like, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, well, that's
So
that's not
numbers
so
as
bad.
in price or numbers
No,
as in
as in like to say, well, an average lot down here
Oh,
might
yeah.
actually only be 10,000 square feet,
Gotcha.
and some people, oh
Yeah.
gosh, that's way too small, that's too tight. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, but do you like the downtown? Well, yeah, well.
Right, exactly.
That's exactly what you're walking
Yeah,
past,
yep,
that
that's true.
house there is maybe only 10 feet from the edge of the right of way, So, anyways, some of it's a process,
When you go into the big cities, you definitely notice. I think New York City, if I'm walking through, I have my niece Kristen lives there, and when I visit her, I love looking at the architecture. I love looking at the buildings.
Yeah.
And when you come across a corner building or one that's just so, it's kind of like Mike Mulligan and the steam engine, or one of those stories that everything got built around it.
Sure, yeah.
You can tell that
Yep.
that was the thing that was there before all that
Yeah,
other
all
stuff.
the other stuff happened, yeah.
And how unique that piece is, or that parcel is. It's so much more than
Yeah.
what's around it.
Yep.
So you like the architecture. It's just so different.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
and I know that has to do with time, and maybe this was built 100 years before this, but still there's something significant, when you look at that
Yeah.
line.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
when we start to close up our interview, we usually have a rapid fire answer, one word answers.
Oh, got it. All right.
Let's see. Favorite code in the book? No, I'm just kidding.
Stairs.
Stairs. I love it. Favorite book? Do you have a favorite book?
It's It's actually like a series.
Okay, that's
So,
good.
As a kid, I really enjoyed this collection called Asterix and Obelix.
Oh, okay.
Yep. It's
I
a
don't know
comic
if we have that
comic
here,
series. You probably don't.
but I do remember that.
Yep.
Favorite color?
Blue.
Favorite flavor of ice cream?
That's going to be chocolate peanut butter.
Chocolate peanut butter, wow. Are you a drinker? Do you have a favorite cocktail?
Yes. That's a little bit too quick, right?
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. I enjoy a mule.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Nice. A Moscow Mule?
Yeah.
Or, okay. Good to know.
I don't know, we're allowed to say Moscow anymore, right?
Locally, we
You get the American mule now,
Yeah, that's
right?
right. That's
Yep.
right. Yes. Favorite favorite place you've like coolest place you've ever been. Favorite place.
Yeah, coolest place I've ever been. Well, I've been to a lot of different ones,
Okay.
but I'll give you a fun one.
Okay.
You know, this kind of ties into the municipal piece a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, one time, this was before kids, I went on a business trip with my wife, and so we went to Brussels. And so she went and did, her work stuff, and I was kind of left on my own. And so I went and took a tour of the Brussels wastewater system. And what was really cool about that was that so much of it, actually, they used a lot of the old kind of Roman, old aqueduct and tunnel systems was still actively being used even to date.
Isn't that interesting?
And so it was as much kind of a sort of underground historical tour of that. So I know I get
I
reactions.
bet most people don't say, "Hey, I want to go look at the." But what a cool thing to do!
Right? Yeah. So I did. I got to do
Wow.
a tour of some of the Brussels wastewater
Yeah.
system.
Did they let you take pictures?
Yeah. You
Yeah?
could take pictures of it. Yeah.
How neat!
But
Oh wow.
so that was a fun one. Those are fun and really kind of unique.
Do you play games? Do you play games, card games or board games with your kids?
So we'll, well, I mean, they're all into, Minecraft and Pokemon and all
Yeah,
that. So
yeah,
I try to
yeah.
keep up with, with Matt on occasion. We'll do some Pokemon Go.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, I used to
they-
play I used to play Rummy with my parents. But
Yeah.
Yep.
So now you're into the Pokemon.
Yeah, I'll do some
yeah.
Pokemon. What were we playing? I mean, the other night we were, what were we playing? It was one of the Mario Kart, one of the Mario Kart games.
Do you have a favorite restaurant? And it doesn't have to be here.
Yeah, no. So I will say one of my favorites that is it's definitely a special occasion one has been Lost Fire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very good.
Yep.
Very good there. And if some people were coming to town and were spending just a day, is there something that you would tell them that they really needed to do when they were here? Besides visit the Graves Library.
Right. It's like you really ought to go to the library. Yep. Yeah, I would. I mean, I'd take them on the tour, the tour of town,
Yeah.
because there's just this, the broad diversity, of the community, You'd start with that kind of typical, a little bit of time in Dock Square, but then it's that, it's that beautiful drive down Ocean Avenue, to just, kind of see that, the majestic power of the water right there.
Right.
And then, down through Cape Porpoise to get a flavor of the pier. And that's just this other,
Yeah.
piece of it.
Yeah.
Out down past Goose Rocks, and then off into the woods
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
There's just so many unique places and just a broad diversity, that
Such
you
a
have
good point.
that you have here in town.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd make sure that they touched a little bit on each one of those.
That's a great answer. I mean, it's great advice for people. So, I mean, can you imagine never seeing the ocean? It's like you come across people and they've never seen the water or, And I try not to take it for granted,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
because I really feel very blessed that we are by this, you know, beautiful body of water out here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a good thing for people to experience when they come to town. So.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not all just Dock Square, right?
No,
I mean,
no,
that's,
no.
so many folks like, boom, that's
Yeah.
that. And there's really a lot more to it.
But you're right,
know.
like taking advantage of the ocean and then going into the woods because we have so many great trails and
Yeah.
you know, places for people to walk
Yep.
and walk safely.
Right.
So
Yeah. No, it's a lot of great assets,
Yeah.
regardless of what your interest is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a little bit of everything,
Right.
that's here for
Right.
folks.
And speaking of great assets, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for being part of this town and having your heart in it because we can definitely tell that you do. So
Yep. Well, thank you.
thanks for showing up for work.
Hey, thanks. Tell you what, I'm never bored.
I bet you
mean,
are not.
Every day it's every day
So-
it's something different, and there's usually after you hang up the phone, you're like, well, it's the first time I heard that one.
But we all do, and I'm sure you don't hear that enough. But we all appreciate what you do.
Oh,
So,
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thanks for being with us.
Sure. Yeah,
Thank you.
This is great.
Mike Kelly, for producing our show tonight. And we hope to see you right back here next time on What's Your Story?